One of the people that was elected at our own caucus here in Litchfield, for our congressional district, was Evan Kenney. Evan Kenney is from Wakefield. He's a neighbor of ours. I had never heard of Evan Kenney prior to this controversy. I don't know him. In fact, I've never met him until tonight. I have spoken to him on the phone, but I've never met him. In other words, I have no reason to take his side or anybody else's side. But when I heard what happened here in this district, and then have the good fortune, if you will, to see Evan on television, national television, telling his story. Evan just graduated from Wakefield High School. He's 18 years old. He's going to college in the fall. A wonderful kid. He's articulate. You can all go on, to those who haven't heard about what's happened, you can go on YouTube and type his name in there, and you'll see him being interviewed on national television for 9 minutes. If I was called to go on national television for 9 minutes, I would not be able to do whatever did. I would have fallen apart. He handled it so articulately. He demonstrated intelligence. He demonstrated, even more importantly, integrity. And this is the kind of person that we need in the Republican Party. And in droves. Instead of welcoming him to our ranks, what does the state party do? They throw him off the delegation and they give his seat to somebody else who did not earn it. To me, that's just plain stealing. I've said this to so many people, I'll say it again tonight. I agree with what Justice Louis Brandeis said many years ago, former Supreme Court Justice. And he's so right, he's so right. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. And if you shine light on injustice, that's the best way to fight it. For that reason, I invited Evan Kenney to come here tonight and tell us what happened in his own words. And I'm very grateful to him for being here. I'm going to ask all of you to give Evan Kenney a big welcome.
Well, thank you guys. Good evening. I'd like to thank the Lynn RCC City Committee for allowing me to share my story here. Forgive me if I repeat anything Mr. Zykofsky said. I'll try not to. I'm not going to speak too much about myself because I'm not that interesting. What happened to me is interesting. I'm actually pretty boring. I'm going to Fitchburg State University in the fall to major in video production. I am a middle child. I have 2 wonderful parents. And I just graduated on June 2nd from Wakefield Memorial High School. Now, at Wakefield Memorial High School, I took a video production class for 4 years. In 3 of those years, I had a very, very motivational teacher. He always told all of his classes, not just me personally, but all of his classes, and always challenged us to, A, question authority through logic and reason. It was very important to him that we use logic and reason and not emotion. And to never trust anyone with power, including himself. Because he always said, don't trust what I say, go do your own research. Because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. His name was Mr. Barris, and I have to say that John Barris is in the room tonight behind the camera, fittingly. And this is the guy who gave me the motivation to do everything that I've done in the past few months, including standing here tonight. So if you don't mind, I'd ask for a round of applause. Now back to business. I was a very, very avid Ron Paul supporter in primaries, just from the outside looking in. And I had heard about the process to elect delegates and the caucuses and the process involved. And I looked at it as an entry ramp to the Republican Party, because I certainly wasn't going to enter the Democratic Party. And these caucuses that you guys all know about, so I won't go into detail, but in 2008, I think our District 6 caucus had somewhere around 100 people in attendance. And most of them were political insiders. People that knew parliamentary procedure very well and had a lot of political experience. But 100 people, that wasn't a lot of people. We could beat that if we worked hard. So I realized all we had to do was go out and get the vote. So I contacted the people of the Liberty Slate. And we were grassroots activists who have no political experience whatsoever. And we had a little kind of mini caucus. None of us knew parliamentary procedure, by the way. So when we showed up at this mini caucus, it was a learning experience, and we kind of mocked the way the real caucus would go a few weeks before April 28th. And they selected me. We had a little election, and they selected me to run as an alternate on April 28th. So the week before, I think you had said the week before, April 28th, the Romney campaign released its official slate. And in our district, there are 9 districts, of course, in our district was stacked. We had Kerry Healy, the former lieutenant governor and former gubernatorial candidate, House Minority Leader Brad Jones, Charlie Baker, who to me was a celebrity. I wish I could have voted for him in 2010, and I couldn't. Sheriff Frank Cousins, I was running against the sheriff, and Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr. I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do to run against these people? Well, I didn't know what to do, really. But what I did instead was just, wrote my speech as I intended to. And I showed up at the caucus, very nervous. I don't often have to wear a suit, I was in a suit. And there were a lot of people there. There were so many people there. In fact, we had more than doubled the attendance of the 2008 district 6 caucus. I think there were 239 people in attendance, which was absolutely unprecedented. With me, I brought 4 friends, all 18-year-olds. 2 of them hardcore Mitt Romney supporters in the primary, 2 of them hardcore Ron Paul supporters. And they all voted for the Liberty slate. And that's important, and we'll get back to that. The way it works simply is we had nominations, and then everyone who was nominated gave their speech in alphabetical order by their last name, and then we all voted and counted the votes. So the delegate results were as follows. We had that gentleman back there, Ed Rombach, was on the Liberty slate, and he was the top vote getter in District 6. He had 117 votes. Second was Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr with 115 votes, 2 votes. And then in third, a tie for third, was John Barris and Tom Bowling, the 2 Liberty slate guys. So we had taken 2 out of those 3 delegate seats, which was unbelievable. It was the coolest feeling ever to realize that all the hard work, all the phone calls that we had put in had actually paid off. Now, we repeated that process for, by the way, Kerry Healy lost, Brad Jones lost. We repeated that same process for the alternate, obviously, in the caucus. So when nominations came around, I have to say this. Brad Jones, I don't know what he was thinking, but Brad Jones nominated himself, despite the fact that he was on the Romney slate as a delegate, as a preferred delegate, not as a preferred alternate delegate. So he nominated himself, and the other 3 Romney slaters were nominated as alternate delegates. So there were 4 Romney candidates, essentially, and 3 Liberty candidates. So Brad Jones, I don't know if it was his ego, I don't know what the deal was, but Brad Jones had nominated himself and essentially taken votes away from his own slate. So Charlie gets up there again, alphabetical order, so Baker. He gets up there, he gives his speech like he's done it a million times, because he has. And it was awesome. I loved listening to it, but at the same time, it made me very nervous. It made me more nervous that I have to follow up. Evan Kenney is a few people, in line behind Charlie Baker. It blew my mind, first of all. But I started my speech, and this is how I started to work forward. So my name is Evan Kenney. I'm from Wakefield. I'm a newcomer to the Republican Party at 18 years old. And I paused. And I don't remember, but I think I lost my train of thought. And I'm like hoping someone bails me out. And I hear a pair of hands start applauding from the front row. And I look down. It's Charlie Baker. And Charlie Baker's looking at me. He just gives me a head nod, and he keeps clapping, and the whole auditorium starts applauding. And that was flattering to begin with. That was one of the coolest feelings I'd ever experienced. This was a great day for me. So everyone, including Charlie, was very, very, very excited to see this young enthusiasm of the party. They didn't care that we were running against them. So we swept. Scott McDonald was also on the Liberty slate. He was the top vote getter with 95 votes. I had 91 votes, and another Liberty slater had 90 votes. So we swept. I think Charlie Baker was the 4th, and he had 72 votes, I think. So it was a decent margin. So now Charlie reaches out to me after the speeches, and I think he kind of knew that it looked bad for the Romney slate. And he reached his hand out to me, and he shook my hand, and he said, "You gave a great speech. I'll be in touch." That was literally probably the best feeling of my life, to have this guy who could be governor in 2014, maybe, I don't know, but this guy who ran for governor at least, and reaching out to me, of all people. I'm just this 18-year-old kid, and he didn't need to do that. He could have been very angry with me, like Brad Jones was, but instead he embraced it. He, to me, was a real Republican. Now I got off the phone with a mutual friend that Charlie and I actually have, is a family friend that I know, and that Charlie knows through business. And you'll have to excuse my language. Charlie sent an email to our mutual friend, and he said, "I just got my ass kicked by a kid from Wakefield." So our friend emailed him back, and he said, "You better be prepared next time you go up against somebody from Wakefield." So fast forward to May 25th, I get this affidavit in the mail. Affidavit, it really wasn't an affidavit, but it was from the Mass GOP and the Allocation Committee chaired by Edward Brown. And it said that I would swear under the pain and penalty of perjury that I would vote for Mitt Romney exclusively on the first ballot at the convention. And when I opened it, I was like, well, that's fine, because this is probably standard procedure anyway. And I pledged to do that at the caucus, because upon nomination, this is, I believe in the rules, that upon nomination, you're accepting a pledge to vote for Mitt Romney or whoever won the primary, unless released by that candidate. So the affidavit was very poorly written. It was entirely legally invalid. And it had a May 29th deadline, 4 days later, including the Memorial Day weekend. So we had 2 business days. I specifically had 2 business days to seek legal counsel about whether or not this was a good idea, kind of the consequences that could happen by signing this legal document under the pain and penalty of perjury. I've never dealt with this before. I had 2 business days to seek out legal counsel, get it notarized and mail it, and get it to their office by Tuesday after Memorial Day. This has never been done before. Totally unprecedented. They've never required delegate-elects to sign affidavits before. And it's also, as the chairman of the Rules Committee will know, it's nowhere in the rules. Is that correct? I actually have to share with you guys, my mom was the first one to say, because I was going to sign it and just send it in, I didn't think anything of it. And my mom said, "You can't sign under the pain and penalty of perjury to do something in the future." And I said, "I guess you're right." Like I went on and asked, and it turns out, what if something happened to Mitt Romney and he wasn't in the race for whatever reason? We don't want our votes bound to that guy who withdrew, or if something else happened, because that would be embarrassing for the party. So, granted, to bring this back and humanize it, my mind was on prom. I was going to go to prom. The deadline was May 29th to get that affidavit in. My prom was May 30th. And we had senior events going on all that week, so I was out of the loop. But what we did do is I consulted the Mass Liberty Caucus, and we sent in an alternate pledge, an alternate affidavit that said, "We affirm under pain and penalty of perjury that we will follow the rules, whether that be Mass General Law or the GOP rules, the national GOP rules." We said we're going to follow those rules, which means we're going to vote for Mitt Romney unless he releases us, which he won't. We plan to vote for Mitt Romney. We plan to represent the voters. So we sent in that pledge. I got it in before that deadline, actually, before the May 29th deadline. So I thought it was good because it said the exact same thing. At least what they were asking for. So I went to prom, went away for a few days, and I was out of the loop. So I showed up to the state committee meeting on June 12th, because we were actually going to protest the general counsel Vin DeVito's decision to throw out the provisional ballots. That's a whole other story. It's irrelevant at this point, but they did. Essentially, what the state committee decided to do was throw out votes of registered Republicans who spent all that time on Saturday morning to come up and vote, simply because of either incompetence or bad records. That's not right. They threw out votes. That's not supposed to happen in America. So we were there to protest that. So I found out then, that night, that we had decided to send in the original GOP affidavit because we had heard that we were going to be bounced if we didn't send in that affidavit. So I rushed around. I found a computer in the hotel. I printed it out. I found a notary on the state committee, which was very lucky. Notarized it, signed it, gave it to. I shook Ed McGrath's hand. I looked in the eyes, and I said, I assure you, sir, forgive me, I was out of the loop, I went to prom. I assure you that I will not be a problem with the convention. I will vote for Mitt Romney on the first ballot, and I would be happy to represent the voters of Massachusetts' 6th Congressional District. That's what I ran to do. And he was very cordial. So I added it to the file, and he said he would add it to the file, and I thought it was done with it. I was like, great, they're being reasonable. Well, the allocation committee met the following night on June 13th. I actually have to mention, she's not here. There was Miss Carnevale at the state committee meeting. She was up there, and this really hit me hard, honestly. I'm watching her address the state committee from behind these ropes that they had us behind. We were being respectful, of course. And Amy Carnevale told the state committee that she attended her caucus in District 6, my caucus, our caucus, where I was elected. And she said that she was, quote, disappointed with the results. And I wanted to yell out, I wanted to say, really? You're disappointed with me? Do I disappoint you? Because I put in a lot of hard work to do this, and I'm just trying to get involved. I'm trying to get involved in the Republican Party. I'm not trying to get involved, I'm not trying to screw up the convention. But what she had said is that she was very disappointed because Romney's biggest supporters would not be going to Tampa. Because they didn't know. And I also wanted to point out, Charlie Baker lost. He was one of those supporters that Amy had referenced. Charlie Baker lost, but he went out of his way to encourage me and to embrace my involvement in the party. So that to me was just a complete counterpoint to her argument that she should have been disappointed. So on June 15th, I got a letter from the allocation committee dated June 13th. It was signed by Ed McGrath and Inc. And it said that the allocation committee and Romney for President Incorporated had just cause and irrefutable evidence that said I would not vote for Mitt Romney on the first ballot, despite 1, 2, 3 pledges and a personal, direct, in-person assurance to him that I would not be a problem, that I would vote for Mitt Romney on the first ballot. So the idea that it's irrefutable to me is a complete fallacy. It's at least refutable, you can at least argue it. Maybe you might disagree, but it's definitely not irrefutable. And I want to reiterate again, April 28th, when Charlie shook my hand, was one of the best feelings of my life. Truly, it really was. But opening this letter was one of the worst. I really felt like a pit in my stomach, like I had been rudely awakened. Now, from there on out, I contacted Stephanie Ebert of the Globe, who had written about us before, so I thought she was the best person to contact, and said, please help me expose this. This is not what the Republican Party is about. This is not what the country's about, but certainly not the Republican Party. So Stephanie Ebert wrote an article specifically about, by the way, I should mention that this happened to 16 other people of the Liberty State across Massachusetts. I'm not the only one. I happen to represent them, but I'm not the only one. So Stephanie picked it up. She wrote a great article about it in the Globe, Sunday Globe, and Michael Graham. So from the Globe to the Boston Herald, either side of the spectrum, Michael Graham also wrote an article about it, and I was very grateful for him. The other day, I just want to mention, I got a long, very thoughtful, detailed email from Charlie Baker, just giving me advice on how to present myself with the press and present myself on TV, which that guy is very busy, as you can imagine. It's very flattering to me that he would even think to email. I was very, very nice of him. And I want to leave you with these 2 quotes, both from Michael Graham's article in the Herald. Cheating, breaking their own rules, screwing over Republicans, isn't that what Democrats are for? And this one's my favorite. It's a little selfish, but this one is definitely my favorite. If Massachusetts Republicans want a state GOP to even exist 20 years from now, they need Evan Kenney a lot more than Mitt Romney. And I think that speaks not to me specifically, but that speaks to this influx of enthusiasm that this party so badly needs, so desperately needs in the state. We're at 11% voter registration. That is disgraceful. We're hardly a factor in Massachusetts. And here we are, we doubled the attendance of our last caucus, and you want to reject it? That's what I came here to talk about. And I just ask that you guys spread the word and try to separate. I want to separate Richard Desai from the corruption. I want to separate Scott Brown from the corruption. I want those guys, I want to be able to vote for them with a good conscience. Because this doesn't represent them. This is a few corrupt power brokers in the state committee who have decided that they don't want to be there. And I hope they change their minds.